Nah, making the second weekend of the F1 season a sprint weekend is diabolical. Some of these new gens haven't even touched the Shanghai asphalt in their entire lives, and you expect them to pick it up in just one practice session. But anyway, before we get into the weekend, there's some midweek news that I gotta address real quick. First and foremost, flexi wings. Remember when Oscar Piastri won last year's Azerbaijan Grand Prix? The whole mini DRS saga? Well, Red Bull saw McLaren's pace, went running to the FIA and begged them to do something. And I don't know how this team has the governing body in their pocket like that, because the FIA then introduced a new directive this week, stating that the area of the rear wing mainplane tip flexibility, previously being 2mm, has now been reduced to 0.75mm, and in Japan, it will go down even further to 0.5. Funny thing is, McLaren weren't even in the wrong. Same with Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. But Alpine and Haas have both been forced to make changes, and yet those guys are still completely ass. It's never been more over. In other news, Hamilton called out the media for the daily ritual of applying double standards. Martin Brundle just started slating him for no reason, saying that Lewis sounded angry with his race engineer Riccardo Adami in Australia. And I'm really sat there like, is the anger in the room with us? Only Lewis can say please and thank you after every sentence and get criticized for it. So, he uses Max as an example of someone whose team radios are actually fiery, but all this did was fuel a pointless back and forth between fan bases. Exactly what the media wanted. I'm telling you, fans, you gotta stop falling for it. Also, there was a rumor the FIA might extend these regulations to 2028 to bring back the V10s. And this is a bit of a non-story, especially since it came from this guy. Because too much money has been poured by teams into the 2026 regs, so V10s will have to wait. Now, after Ferrari's amazing weekend in Australia, and me finally noticing where the K1 button is on the steering wheel, they headed to China with a positive mindset. And their new test and reserve driver Zhou Guanyu looking freshly dripped out in Ferrari kit at his home race. And speaking of drip, Charles brought this new helmet. George's was very nice as well, same with Albon and Alonso. But Ferrari made this custom hat, which looks like it has... yeah, let's just move on. FP1 went by very quickly. With the circuit being resurfaced, there was a lot of grip and track evolution was crazy, but so was tyre degradation. Everybody got on with their programs, Doohan's power unit decided to call it quits, and the cameraman immediately cut straight to Franco Colapinto, and Liam Lawson found the gravel. Much to the delight of Tsunoda, Ricciardo, and Checo fans. I swear, the amount of people hate watching this guy is insane. I already knew the comments under every social media post would be a mess. But it's only practice. Surely going into sprint qualifying, he'll be on the pace. After all, he's not here to make friends, he's here to win.
And Liam Lawson is champion in the Red Bull.
Hulkenberg and Ocon got out-qualified by their rookie teammates. The two Alpines were just slow, but the dynamic duo of Hadjar and Tsunoda were moving like prime Kobe and Shaq. Isaac gave Yuki a tow down the back straight that got him into SQ3. Stroll was surprisingly on the pace of his teammate all weekend and actually out-qualified him for the sprint. Alex also got tired of the disrespect and dunked 8/10 on his teammate's head. And here was me thinking Sainz was going to come straight in and start wiping the floor with Albon. Apologies Alex, I wasn't familiar with your game. Then we get to the main four teams. George was quietly solid, so was Antonelli, and McLaren were once again looking quickest all weekend. Everyone thought they were going to dominate SQ3 with either Piastri or Norris, until a guy named Y'all don't understand how gassed that is. Even had to make an edit for a sprint qualifying poll, but considering it's been 2 years since I've seen him actually put together a complete qualifying lap, alright, allow me, alright? Also, Max Verstappen is one hell of a driver, because I really thought he was about to chain snatch us right at the end. Just goes to show, quality drivers always make the difference in the end. These two showed why they're in a different league to the rest of the grid. This was Lewis's second qualifying session in a Ferrari, and immediately he was like,
I understand it now.
And put it on pole. Now Charles struggled quite a lot throughout the weekend with setup, but still managed to squeeze out a P4 and only a couple of tenths off his teammate, who, let's be honest, this is one of Lewis's best tracks. Oscar was P3 with a solid final run, and as for Lando, I don't know why I thought things would be any different than last year. In my last video I was defending him, since he drove amazingly on Australia, and I stand by it, because he actually had a great race. People were trying to discredit it for agenda, but I was like, you know what, I'ma give him his flowers, and I stand by that. But this time around, there's nothing to defend, man. Too many mistakes on that final run left him in P6. Once again, the lights got too bright for bro. He felt the Hamilton Verstappen aura and could not hack it. You know that qualifying session was absolute cinema when F1 are creating graphics like these. All this hype for a damn sprint race. We used to be a proper country. Nonetheless, a Hamilton Verstappen front row lockout is a hood classic. Everyone's gonna tune into that. First corner, Lewis maintains the lead beautifully, cuts across Max and doesn't give him anything to work with. Most of the top 10 hold position, but what does Lando Norris do?
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no.
Man, Lando, you really make it hard for people to defend you, because what is this? Bro returned to default settings. He spent the rest of the race looking at Stroll's rear wing, only until the very end when he finally passed. But you would have thought since he has a way superior car to the Canadian that he would just breeze past. So why did he struggle so much to overtake? Well, a bit of a skill issue, but also dirty air, which transitions nicely into the fight at the front. Hamilton is looking like his prime self, controlling the gap. He understands better than anyone the importance of easing a tyre into the stint and not overcooking it, especially on a track that's been newly resurfaced. So he baits Verstappen into attacking him early on to destroy his tyres, which is exactly what the Dutchman does, and he eventually falls into the hands of Piastri. The Australian gets past eventually, but that fight allowed Lewis to pull an even bigger gap to his rivals. It was a genius bit of racing IQ, but it's Lewis Hamilton we're talking about, so pretty standard. And to all of you who are running your mouths, Ralf Schumacher, Flavio, Helmut, where you at now, bruh? Nah, don't go to hiding, come outside, I just want to talk. For the millionth time in his racing career, Lewis Hamilton silenced his critics. But for the first time ever, he crossed the line first in a Ferrari.
Oggi è storia, Lewis Hamilton vince la sprint del Gran Premio di Cina.
It really was a match made in heaven. Ferrari had never won a sprint race until Lewis Hamilton showed up and did a first try. Also, it was his first ever win in this format. And even though it's just a sprint, it's special nonetheless. The scriptwriters are moving crazy because China 2006 was Michael's last victory for Ferrari. Fast forward 19 years, Lewis wins his first for the Scuderia in poetic fashion. Bro did so well, he even had Bono revert to default settings.
Yeah, copy that, Lewis.
But at least he has another incredible talent to manage. Antonelli's race was pretty quiet since he was mostly behind Tsunoda, who once again was ice cold. Started P8, finished P6. Absolutely generational run he's been on. And I think he's now 8-0 against Lawson, so Red Bull can hold that. The thing is though, I actually don't want him to go to Red Bull at this point because it would ruin his reputation. Just like Lawson's reputation is getting shredded to bits right now. That car only seems to work well for one driver, and it's crazy how this team never learns. But we'll talk more about that soon enough. My boy Charles though, he got mugged on lap 1 by George, and then got affected by dirty air for the rest of the sprint. They finished 5th and 4th respectively behind Verstappen in 3rd, and George's defending in those closing stages was actually superb, I'll give him that. Charles put up a decent fight towards the end, but really struggled through turn 13, which is the long right-hander before the straight. And what happened to Leclerc also happened to Albon, who started 9th and finished 11th. Literally, it was all decided on lap 1. Sainz was nowhere for some reason, Gasly made some decent moves to go from 17th to 12th. Towards the tail end of the grid, Lawson was actually making up ground. I mean, it's not hard to do when you start last and are driving a Red Bull, but you know, progress is progress. Doohan was getting cooked left, right and centre, and on the final lap, he got tangled with Bortoleto. And I can't decide who's going to be more ruthless, Helmut Marko or Flavio Briatore. Actually, scratch that, it's Flavio by miles. Even though Lawson has probably performed worse up until this point, but there was a chance of redemption for qualifying later. Can he get himself out of Q1 this time?
And once again, it's Liam Lawson in the Red Bull who's at the back of the pack.
This time, there were actually no excuses, man. Most of the rookies are new to this track, and they all showed some great pace, if not more. The sprint quali lap, he struggled to get the pressures down and couldn't set a lap. But this time around, it was genuinely pure pace that got him dead last on the grid. Maybe he should just start making friends, because winning ain't working out too well for him. The two Haas drivers swapped places. This time, Bearman got knocked out in Q1 and Ocon secured a very strong P11. Same with the Sauber drivers. The Hulk outperformed Gabi this time around, slotting in just behind the Frenchman. Alpine were pretty bad, Aston were even more mid than the sprint, and Carlos was nowhere once again, but made some big setup changes for the race. His teammate continued his 100% Q3 streak by qualifying P10. Shaq and Kobe, Isaac and Yuki, were insanely good, ending up P7 and P9 respectively. Tsunoda made a big mistake on his final run, so it could have been a lot more, but all credit to Hadjar for his performance. P7 ahead of all the other rookies is brazy. Just goes to show that Racing Bull's car is working very, very well. Antonelli was the filling in the Racing Bull sandwich in 8th, but his teammate, woof! George, bro. Now what do they call this guy Mr. Saturday? Because splitting the McLarens is an impressive achievement. But what he said afterwards really caught my attention, because for most of the session, didn't really find a good rhythm. Only until the very last lap, where he quote, rolled the dice and tried something different on the prep lap, did he see any kind of promise. And it links back to some of the comments he made last year about how the Pirelli tyres are just completely baffling. How they just behave a certain way on one run, but then a completely different way on another run in similar conditions. Also, Pirelli increased the tyre pressures for the sprint and for qualifying, which may have been the reason why Ferrari's pace vanished all of a sudden, in addition to some small tweaks made on the car. Lewis put a very strong lap together, and Charles ended up copying his setup and it worked out much better for him. But ultimately, nobody could match Oscar Piastri, who secured his maiden pole position in Formula 1. And given how last year qualifying was an area where he needed to improve on, this indicated he's made significant progress. Verstappen sharing the same row as Norris though, let's see if he can maintain position this time around. Wait, he's up to second already.
That tastes like promotion!
Verstappen surprisingly choked at the start and allowed both Ferraris to get past, but the two red cars ended up making contact with each other. Charles lost his front wing end plate, but somehow had much better pace than Lewis, who was ahead of him. As a result, Hamilton suggested that they swap places since Leclerc was closing in very fast, and given how much he was struggling in dirty air in the sprint, it only made sense. Meanwhile, it wasn't a great day for Bortoleto and his manager Fernando Alonso. The Brazilian spun on the first lap and went into the gravel, but luckily he was able to drive it out and continue, but never really made an impression on anyone thereafter. Gasly was the first to notice Alonso's brakes were on fire, and turns out he was right, retiring a few laps later. The first stint was mostly management from everyone. Antonelli made up places on the first lap to move up into 7th, crucially getting past Tsunoda. But then Mercedes allowed him to get undercut by both V-Carbs and Esteban Ocon, which just wasn't ideal. Russell almost got one of the McLarens, but couldn't keep Norris behind. From there, not much really happened up front. Hamilton tried a two-stop that didn't work, Verstappen found a bit of pace and got past Leclerc with relative ease. And for a second, I was getting early 2022 vibes, but his tyres at that point were completely finished. Ferrari apparently was supposed to have set up their car for the race, just like Australia, which is why their qualifying form dipped on Saturday. But it looked like it just made their tyre deck even worse, and so both drivers came home in 5th and 6th. It was also frustrating to watch Charles not be able to pass George. Like, the dirty air these days really does a number on these cars. Even though it looked like he had way better pace at some point, he just couldn't get through, and it just completely destroyed his tyres. But at least he was able to find some form again after Hamilton showed the Ferrari's potential. I don't really know what happened to Lewis in the race. Maybe the contact at the start affected things, but I don't know. This Ferrari still seemed very peaky in terms of performance. But oh well, at least half the weekend was absolutely goated.
Oh my God, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the f***, man?
Get your ass on, boy. You get your guy.
For the McLarens, it was relatively straightforward for Oscar Piastri. He got the best start, was very hard but fair against Russell. And that was crucial, since clean air was more important than anything. Particularly for those McLarens, they thrive when they're out in the open. Oscar managed his race to perfection, and compared to some of his wins last year, this one was undisputed. The first one in Hungary was controversial because of the team orders with his teammate, and in Baku, the mini DRS saga made that win a bit questionable. But today, nobody could match his pace. Oscar wasn't the only problem Lando had this race, because his brakes just started failing towards the end. He still managed to bring it home in second though and secure the 1-2. His teammate is becoming a pretty formidable driver, and as I said in the last vid, it's the consistency that counts. Maintaining that over the course of a season is a lot harder than people realize. And speaking of consistency, let's talk about the Viper, George Russell. Another P3 in the bag, he's now second in the championship. He didn't have the pace to challenge the McLarens, but at least he kept them honest throughout. Also, he was one of the first ones to call the one-stop being a genuine possibility, once again showing some great intuition. His teammate Antonelli got driver of the day, which was a bit weird. I mean, I really like the kid, but damn, Piastri, Bearman, Ocon, his own teammate? Anyway, he started where he finished in 8th place because the Racing Bulls decided to sell for no reason. Why they went for a two-stop, I don't understand. They just gave up track position for no good reason. And since Deg was very low, everyone else just stayed out on a one-stop. Tsunoda ended up last because Doohan was told by Flavio that this would be his last race. Nah, I'm joking. But the way he was driving, it felt like he just didn't care anymore. This man was fighting for his life against Isaac, which was actually quite funny. No matter what, nobody was getting past him. Anyway, Doohan ended up with a 10-second penalty, losing out to Lawson, who despite having changed his setup completely and starting from the pit lane, was mostly battling against Hulkenberg in a kick Sauber. Honestly, that was such a stink-up, it's not even worth analysing. But it's not too late for Estonian Formula 7, they ain't ready for him over there. But jokes aside, let's wait for Japan, a track he's more familiar with, to see if he can turn things around. Around the midpoint of the race, Bearman was tearing through the pack on mediums, and hit Liam with the old switcheroo at the hairpin. And he kept using that move on all the other drivers, finishing the race in a fantastic P10. His teammate Ocon also had an incredible drive to come home in 7th. See, that's more like it, Haas. I never doubted you, Mr. Komatsu. Let's keep this up in Japan. Also, shout out to Ocon's race engineer Laura Muller, first female race engineer in Formula 1 history, and doing a wonderful job so far. Albon was phenomenal as well. During the first stint, the team were informing him about the tyres, and he basically replied with, "I'm him," and took the lead of the race for a bit. That first stint from Albon was incredible, and going a step further, the second stint was managed beautifully, and he crossed the line to secure another points finish. P9 on his birthday, take a bow, Sir Albon. I can't say the same for Sainz, that was a weekend to forget for him. Gasly and Stroll just missed out on points, but still had decent performances. I think it's fair to say now, McLaren has a comfortable margin over the rest. I mean, duh. Doesn't matter if it's wet or dry. They're currently the team to beat. Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari need to find a way to close that gap. Otherwise, they're just going to run away with everything. But I've still got hope this season will be a banger. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you thought of the race weekend, your highlights and talking points. Be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel if you're new to get my latest videos in the future. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.